Hey, it's Tandy with the Common Ground Alaska podcast, and I'm really excited for our show today. Today we have James from Pluck. Is it Pluck Seasonings or just plain Pluck?
Pluck, but we now have added this, Pluck superfood seasonings.
Oh, well, even better. And I agree with that name. So let's just go with it. And I'm really excited to have James on today because not only does he have a really cool background story, but the neat thing about what James is doing is he's taking something that we all know, those of us who are trying to eat healthier and do something, feed our families healthier. He's taking organ meats and making them, I don't want to say hidden because it's not like we're trying to dupe anyone. But he's making it so that it's less of an aversion for people. And not only that, but he's up leveling our food in the process. So it tastes better. I feel like I kind of need to back up, but I'm excited. I'm so excited about this. So first of all, just thank you for talking with us, James.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I'll kind of describe what I know of Pluck, and then you can jump into your story. How about that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I met James at the Modern Homesteading Conference in last July, June or
Yeah.
July.
In
And
uh
he
in
said, what was that?
in Idaho, right? Coeur d'Alene.
Yeah. Yep, in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. That's right. Yeah. And what he was selling, there's vendors everywhere, and I tried to visit every single vendor, and most people, you like to support all the vendors. And so, but I kind of begrudgingly went to James's booth because it was like organ meat seasoning. That's a little bit weird and it's a little bit outside my comfort zone. But I knew in my mind that I need to be trying to eat more organ meat. So I just kind of hesitantly walked up and talked to him. And you were sharing a booth with a guy that does a farming podcast, and he had the hats that I wanted to buy. So it made it a little easier, right? So um, and I just want to fast forward because I want you to be the star of the show here. But I bought the Pluck seasoning, some of it, and it's all gone, and I need to order more. But I just started putting it in. I just used it just like I would season salt in absolutely everything that I was cooking. Like it didn't go on cold cereal, but it went on everything else. Like anything that I was cooking on my stove got Pluck seasoning, and it was funny because I forget I had made something like with noodles. It was like noodles with a white sauce, and it's same thing I made all forever. And Jean said, "What'd you do different? This is really good." And
Wow.
I said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, I added liver to it." And
And liver, heart, kidney, spleen, and pancreas. Five organs.
right. Well, yeah, I should have told him that. I would have gotten a bigger jaw drop, right? But and I said, no, I said, I'm using this new seasoning and I've sort of been using it in everything and it's so good. And he even admitted it was really good. So you've made an amazing product that tastes really good and it's so good for us. And it's a great way to get this organ meat into our bodies when we're a little bit when we're kind of taking baby steps.
Yeah.
So that's my in a nutshell. Now the show is yours. So,
Well,
James.
I wanted to say though, I love hearing that feedback because we get that a lot. And I always joke with people. I'm like, oh, if you want to be considered a fantastic chef, you start using Pluck because I can't even tell you how many times people are like, oh, the only thing I did different was I added your seasoning. And that night, everyone wanted seconds. And they kept saying how good my cooking was.
See, you learned
And I
it
was
from the
like,
chef.
oh, but it's not it's not, how do I say this? It's not like a secret. So what it is the organ meats. And as I mentioned, there's five of them. We put freeze dried powdered liver, heart, kidney, spleen, and pancreas, and we combine it with red mineral salt and spices and herbs. And the organ meats have what's called umami. It's our fifth unique taste. So the ones we all learned about in school are salty, sweet, bitter, sour. There was a fifth that was discovered in Japan in the 90s, and that's called umami. And the best way to describe umami is savory or meaty. It's kind of umami can be in mushrooms, it can be in tomatoes, it's in beef, it's also in organ meats, and it's particularly strong in organ meats. And because umami is a unique flavor, what happens when you add it to food is it actually brightens all the other flavors. So it's something that the ultra processed food industry knows about. And what they do is they add MSG to their packaged products because MSG is umami flavored. I just would rather add something that's not only natural and but also healthy for you, because some people are very sensitive to MSG. So the umami though is what makes everything pop. That's that's kind of it.
Well, it works because it is a really good seasoning and if you're used to adding seasoned salt or whatever, all I did was just simply replace the other, I do still use salt.
Yeah.
But then I add the pluck to it and that's it. I don't usually sometimes I'll add something else, but for the most part, but it's a great way to get your foot in the door and realize, okay, so organ meats aren't all bad. And they aren't all bad. I mean, people have been eating them forever, right? So this
Yeah.
is a new thing, but we just stopped eating them. So then it got weird. And so now now we are realizing we're missing those health benefits. So I love that
Well,
you've solved that problem.
well, and the reality is that there was a 2015 study that showed 92% of Americans are nutrient deficient. And I think we're in, now 2025. So I would say it's probably closer to 94%, if not higher. And when you think about that, so let's just assume 94% of Americans are nutrient deficient. But if you look at America, we are not calorie deficient. And I
Mhm.
always think about when I was growing up on the commercials, there would be Sally Struthers with kids in Ethiopia who were literally skin and bones, flies all around them, and just truly nutrient deficient. That's the visual I had for nutrient deficient. It's not the overweight, obese American. And
Mhm.
yet that's the reality is that we are not calorie deficient. So it's not an issue of we're not getting enough food like the back in the day, the Ethiopian, but it's more the issue is the food choices we're making. And when you do the research, and anyone can do it, and this is how my process is. I just started doing the research as a father. I was like, okay, I want to get these nutrient dense foods into my kids and myself because I want them to thrive, but I also want to live long enough to enjoy them thriving. And so I was like, what are the most nutrient dense foods? And I knew from my background as a chef, but I just wanted to, confirm it. And organ meats, like beef liver pops up. Anyone can do the search. Everything that comes up, whether it's beef, salmon, blueberries, kale, um, they will always include beef liver, and beef liver will blow all of them out of the water, like every single one. When I saw that, I was like, okay, so clearly beef liver is probably the most nutrient dense food on the planet. And it's not even just beef liver. I just say organ meats, all of them, even though they're all different, but I just find them all very important. So if organ meats are the most nutrient dense food on the planet, then why aren't we eating them here in the US? Because clearly they're eating them in the rest of the world. They're part of world cuisine. They show up everywhere. So I was like, well, what are those hurdles? And what I identified was one is the taste, which you mentioned. The other is the knowledge of cooking. We've kind of lost that. A lot of people look at them and it's just so unfamiliar that they don't know what to do with it. They also don't like touching it or smelling it, right? So just
Mhm.
everything that comes with cooking it is a hurdle. And then the third is potentially sourcing, because even though we have the internet, still people, have issues finding them. And then I guess the fourth is that even if you know you should be eating them, you're getting them in capsules, and then you kind of go through capsule fatigue, or you just have, you just kind of ebb and flow with it, and then what's the point? Because you're not really benefiting them from it if you're not eating it. And that's when I just started to put two and two together and just kind of use my sensibilities to come up with Pluck. And what's fascinating though is since I've started the company, I've learned so many things about the product that I didn't know when I created it. One being that, oh, when you create a health product that doesn't require a new habit, meaning that we already all season our food. So I'm just suggesting instead of using Lowry's, you just use our product. And now, and we have this image on our website. We show you like what you're getting from Lowry's and versus what you're getting from us. And it's like night and day. Like getting nothing basically from Lowry's except tons of salt and even some sugar, and they even have seed oils in their all purpose. And then you just see our lineup, and it's just like nutrient every box is checked of all the nutrients. So that's one thing is like, oh, well, health becomes achievable when it doesn't require a new habit. And that's what I'm in this business for. I truly want people to help people. And if it's not something you're going to do, then it's snake oil. So it's all about like what are the little things that we can do every day that are going to move our health needle. And for my money, if I can make that seasoning that you're already using daily healthier for you, then now we've got real health. And then the other one is what we've already talked about is like how it makes all food taste better and how, but then the third is how versatile it is. And you
Mhm.
kind of capture this, but you can put it on anything. And I didn't know that. Like my kids, we put it on popcorn. It's delicious. It's
Oh.
so good on popcorn. It basically it's so good on like popcorn and eggs and rice and all these different things that particularly these staples like popcorn that you're just you know you kind of are used to tasting a certain way. I can't eat popcorn without Pluck on it now because it's such a good and unique flavor that I can't find anywhere else. Like even you go to the movies, like it doesn't taste good. It's just like, oh, that you can tell that the oil that they're using is not real, you know, it's bad and it's not real butter and you can just taste it. And I'm like, oh, I just wish I had some Pluck on her.
You could revolutionize going to the movie theater, right?
Oh, I wish. Yeah, I don't think the vegans would be happy with us, but definitely like I think we could really if we can turn that kind of comfort food or the snacky things into something healthy, now we're
Mhm.
on to something.
So now you're getting my mind thinking because one of the things that we do is we sprout and then dehydrate pumpkin seeds when we grow our pumpkins.
It's
And
delicious.
I never even thought about putting pluck on. This is revolutionary. I need vats of this stuff.
Oh, I do. So whenever I go to conferences, and I might even have had this when we met, um, I usually will do that. I'll soak some nuts or seeds, and then basically I'll roast them and then I toss them in just a little bit of oil or fat, and then I sprinkle Pluck on them, and that's usually so I'll sample Pluck in that way at conferences. But the other one I do is coconut, shaved coconut. So I buy just shaved coconut from like Trader Joe's. They sell a flake, and it has nothing on it. It's just coconut. And what I do is I then put it in the oven. Um, and it only roasts for like maybe 2 minutes. It's not very long because you can burn it really easily. But I roast it in the oven and I pull it out and then I toss a tiny bit of coconut oil on it and then the Pluck, and it's such a good snack and it's really good for you because coconut it's a medium fatty chain acid, so it doesn't convert into fat as like other foods. So it's sort of one of the healthier snacks you could eat, and it's got
Yeah.
Pluck on it. It's so good, and then it's a good salad topper as well. So good.
Yeah, this is really fun. So now that we've gotten everybody excited about pluck, let's
Hopefully,
take
you're hungry. Is everyone
let's
hungry now?
I'm hungry while we're recording this. So now let's take a step backwards. This isn't something that just your everyday person could have invented. So you have a background as a chef, is that right? Let's talk about your food background.
Yeah, so I'm about 20 years plus professional chef. Um It's kind of funny because my mom always laughs like, "How did I get a chef for a son?" Because I grew up in a household where when the smoke detector went off, you knew dinner was ready.
That's
Like,
awesome.
and it really was that way. And we did not grow up eating organ meats as well. But you know, I was at age 7. I learned how to scramble an egg, and I was sold. I just didn't know that could be a career. So I was kind of late to coming to that table. People may remember, but most people may not remember that back in the day, there wasn't really an avenue for you to be a chef except just to run a restaurant, to work at a restaurant. Like that was kind of it. There was two When I was growing up, there were only two celebrity chefs. There was Julia Childs and then the Frugal Gourmet, and they were both on PBS.
That's true. Yeah.
And that was it. so there wasn't a lot of models of what's possible. We didn't have the celebrity um, chef culture we do now. And so I just didn't see it as a career. I thought, well, I don't want to work at night, which is what you would have to do if you had a restaurant. And so just didn't pursue it. And it was just a hobby. And then it was 9/11 actually that inspired me to reevaluate my life. And I was like, what I want to do moving forward is everything that has heart, that it has to have be on mission, and it can't just be to pass the time. And so I reevaluated my life and I was like, well, what are the things that I've truly loved? And I think our purest time is when we're kids, when we're truly following into like our essence and the energies we're following energy at our whim. And I think that's usually very telling of what you're into or what you like or who you are. And so I just kind of rethought about that and I was like, wait a second, cooking. Like I've always loved it. And as I did the research, I found that it was something I could do, and I found a school that resonated. And I knew right away I did not want to be a restaurant chef. I was living in Hollywood at the time, and I thought, well, I want to be a private chef. I want to work one on one with people, and so that's the avenue I went down.
That's pretty cool. I am resonating with your story so much because when I was a little girl, I grew up off grid in the total backwoods of Oregon. And I devoured the Little House on the Prairie books, every one of them. And I read them over and over and over. And I still have my set from when I was a little girl, and like the covers are falling off, pages are falling out, but they're still like my favorite. And I remember being, and now granted, we lived off grid out in the middle of nowhere, but somehow I didn't feel like I was living like the prairie life, like the homestead life at the time. Even though, we didn't have a big garden. We had to drive into school it was like an hour to school every day. My parents both worked off of our place. We didn't necessarily work on the place, and we certainly weren't like self-supporting. We still went to the grocery store and stuff. And so I knew, even I as a little girl knew that that was kind of what inspired that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be Laura Ingalls when I grew up. That's more than anything else. And it was the working through the hard times together as a family, and the um growing our own food and all that stuff just really fascinated me. So it's fun to hear you say that, because as a kid sometimes I think we do intuitively know deep down what's going to be meaningful for us. And then when I was in high school, I was going to live in Seattle, in the middle of Seattle, and walk everywhere and buy groceries off from the farmers market day of, and cook them fresh. And then I came back to my roots. So so we always
Well,
kind of detour.
how I'm just so curious, like for you, because you're living that life now, right? And so
Yeah, yeah.
is it different or is it better or is it harder than you thought?
Well, it probably would be harder had I not grown up the way that I did. But growing up off grid, you have challenges, whether you're living off the land or not, there's still multiple challenges.
Mm.
So I'd say that in that regard, I was probably more prepared than most. But in some ways and I grew up, I we did can a lot of our food. We just went to farms and bought stuff, and we'd can, I grew up canning and preserving, and I love that whole, you know my granny had a big garden, and like shucking the peas and green beans and all that kind of stuff on her porch are some of my
Mm.
favorite things I remember doing while she'd tell stories and all that. Um so I guess to answer your question, I don't know how we ended up here. It's kind of a God story, but I'm glad we're here, and it's better than I ever could have imagined.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah,
That's really
so
good.
sorry. I'm
I
supposed
love it because I find like that's the thing is that's kind of what I face with cooking even. So I loved cooking,
to. Mhm.
but it's one thing to love something and do it as a hobby, and then another to have it be your career. And I definitely went through a process of like suddenly this thing that I loved at a whim was now something I had to do all the time. And it was a little bit of a process, but I was very fortunate. I remembered having a conversation with a friend about how he got his dream job, but then he didn't stick it out and he left it and he always regretted that. And I just remember going like, yeah, I think we just have to sometimes like not expect everything to be perfect and more just kind of recognize it's a journey and
Mhm.
that there are going to be moments where it's harder and others that it's not, but that it's the whole journey. It's not the just the end result that we're focusing on, but the entire process of that journey that is what's important. And so just trying to be mindful and present through each day.
I agree. And seeing when it gets hard, seeing what's happening that's good, because sometimes that'll even take you in a different direction than you anticipated when you find what is working or what is fulfilling. The one thing I didn't expect in our journey was I didn't expect the teaching side of things or the community. I thought because, Laura Ingalls, they did live in like small towns and stuff, but that wasn't really the crux of the stories. And so I didn't realize that ours was going to be so community based, and that piece is way better. So
Oh yeah, that's the part that's mm, I feel is probably some of the most important pieces to living is just it is community, and
mhm,
yet sadly, so many of us are so disconnected. I find that very fascinating. If anything, particularly coming from life pre-computer, right? Which
mhm.
I don't know how old you are, but I did. I was born in '73, so um, I just remember this promise of the future and being told that this technology would connect us. And it's fascinating. Yes, it's connecting you and I right now. You're in Alaska and we're able to talk, but it's not um it's making when we're not on a podcast or we're not actually like talking, we're very disconnected. And it shows up even with our food sources as well, of course.
It's so true. It's so true. So that was a fun detour. That's I love talking about real life. I think I would much rather have real conversations in real life than gloss over everything. So that's part of the beauty of our podcast. So, but I still want to hear. So I want to hear more about your backstory. So you decided you weren't going to work in restaurants, and so you wanted to become a private chef, and that just worked for you. That you just stepped right into that, and that was easy. Or
I was very fortunate. The school that I went to in New York was looked at as a feeding school, like a place to for people that were assistants to celebrities or to who manage homes to reach out to for private chefs. So the school itself ended up just being an incredible resource. It's not there anymore, so there's no point in me mentioning the school. It doesn't exist anymore. The founder passed away, and then her daughters really couldn't continue it. But it was an incredible calling card. And so my first few years, I work came to me. I mean, it was incredible, and was I was very much seen as a very reliable source in LA. I had the good fortune of cooking for Tom Cruise for multiple years, Gerard Butler. Um, I even had the opportunity to work with Barbara Streisand briefly. I got to see her beautiful home on the cliff over there that people remember was in the news many years ago. Um, I worked for Mariska Hargitay, if anyone knows from TV land. But just some really amazing group of celebrities and people and George Clooney as well. And so, what's interesting is I got these experiences, and I really enjoyed. My ego loved it, of course, because when you work for Tom Cruise, people just assume you're the most amazing chef, you know. So it brought me some cachet, but I at the same time I still felt unfulfilled. There was a piece of me that was noticing that how I cooked, making everything from scratch, using real food. Seemed to be really helping people with their health. I mean, so many families, I was cooking for them, and the women had baby weight that they couldn't lose for years. And then I started cooking for them, and it melted right off. So I was really seeing this amazing response to this style of cooking. And I just felt convinced that everyone needed support. And so I left working for Tom Cruise to start a meal delivery service. And I ran that for 6 years. But if there's any entrepreneurs listening, besides running that business, I also ran my health into the ground. So, because any entrepreneurship is just incredibly challenging. But what's fascinating that a lot of people don't talk about is like you can be really great at making a pie, but that doesn't mean you're really great at running a pie business.
Mhm.
And so I really kind of learned how to run a business by doing it. And I made lots of mistakes. And I was, I worked so hard, but it was ironic. And this happens a lot in the field, but like, here I was trying to feed people healthy food, but it was my health that was suffering. And so to get out of the business, I actually moved away. Like my wife and I and our first daughter, we moved to Portland, Oregon, and I sold the business and I just needed to get my health back. And so I was a stay-at-home dad for a good 4 years. And during that time, that's when I just started really my creativity started to come back. My my why, my why for being healthy or taking care of myself was about my kids. And ultimately what really brought the inspiration towards Pluck was my two daughters. At the time it was they were around 5 and 1, right around there. And we had gone to Canada for them to see their grandfather, and they both contracted Shiga toxin, which is a form of E. coli,
Mm.
and it can be deadly to young kids and then the elderly because you can't hold anything in and you cannot take antibiotics. You can actually kill someone if you give them antibiotics. And so we were very fortunate that we were able to diagnose what it was because my wife's a nutritionist and she did a stool sample. And when it came back, like we actually got called by the health department because they were like, oh, okay, well, this is serious. You have to, you can't do antibiotics. And they just kind of informed us. But um, my oldest got through it pretty quickly. So it was like 3 days. And my youngest did not. And she was already a very slender baby. But it was really scary as a parent to watch my child go to literally skin and bones and feeling helpless. And I just remember sitting there as a chef. I'm a chef, my wife's a nutritionist, and we felt helpless.
Mhm.
And to a degree, you just have to wait it out. And I think around the eighth day, she finally could hold something down, and it was toast. And I was watching her eat that toast. And of course, when you've been sick and you finally do eat something, that one food that doesn't make you sick, you almost get addicted to. Like you're like, oh, this is a safe food. So you only eat that. And so she would not eat anything but toast for
Yeah.
weeks. And I was just thinking, like, oh, this is not healthy for her. Like, this is not nutritious. And I kept thinking about, gosh, if there was just something I could sprinkle on that toast to satisfy my parenting needs to keep my child healthy. And that's kind of where it started. And then it steamrolled beyond that. But that was definitely the catalyst that made me go, how can I meet this need as a parent to get healthy, nutritious food into my daughters or kids in general, but not have it be a fight, not have it be this thing where I slave away at the kitchen. I hear this all the time from parents. I made pate and then no one ate it but me. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to be in that situation.
Yeah. It's true, and it's easy to have it happen. I've done it myself. I remember when I first started sprouting and milling grains, for my family, and they were used to Wonder Bread. And, you put so much work into something, and you're excited about it because it's gonna, you know, it's going to feed them well. And, whatever that food is, whether it's something from your garden that, okay, so now you've started it from seed, you've grown it, you've weeded it, you've, made sure it had all the nutrients it needed, and then you put it on the table and your kid's like, I don't like salad. And, it's really hard. And so I think that's a huge advantage that you have in Pluck is that you're not, like you said before, you said something about it has to be achievable. it becomes achievable when it doesn't require a new habit. We're all seasoning our food. And so, especially for parents who are struggling to feed nutrient dense foods to their kids, because some of it is, it's just weird when it's not what we're used to. It's not that it's wrong or bad, it's actually better for you, but our eyes and our taste buds are saying, this is weird. And so it's beautiful that there's something that isn't weird, I guess.
Yeah. Well, our palate, I mean, it's really our palates, it's very physical. Like, well, there is some emotional component to it. Like you said, like we look at these things. I think on a certain level, when we hear of organs, we think of our own mortality because you hear of a liver or you look at a liver, it makes you think of your own liver or your own heart or whatever it is. And so in 2025, actually, I want to rebrand organs. I want to call them freedom meats. And mostly it's because they're freedom in that we want to focus on food freedom. We want to make sure that we can get the foods that we want, whether it's raw milk or any part of the animal, from that grass-fed animal. We want to be able to have access to it all. And right now we don't. You can't get certain parts of the animal in retail. You can't get raw milk. In some states, it's illegal. So I say freedom meats because I want to have the freedom to choose what I eat. I also want that product to be free from things, right? And right now, as I mentioned, so many of us are nutrient deficient and we're defaulting to either supplements or fortified foods. And that stuff is it's really the illusion of health. It's not, you don't know how much your body's actually absorbing. And a
Mhm.
lot of times you don't even know what's in it. I mean, like a lot of people go to, for example, some of these markets like Trader Joe's for their supplements because they go, oh, it's so cheap. Well, it's cheap because there's less active ingredient in it. It's mostly filler. And even when we buy seasonings, it's very fascinating. Like, but if you think about it, what's the first ingredient in any seasoning blend?
Oftentimes sugar, right?
No, no, salt, right?
Well, salt, yeah.
Salt. It's always the first thing.
Yeah,
Sometimes there's sugar in it, and you're right, it's probably high up the list if it is in it, but it's always salt.
you're right.
And and the reason for that is because it's cheap. And
Yeah,
so what they're doing when you buy a seasoning in a store is really what it is it's salt that has some seasoning,
yeah.
but it's mostly salt. That's why it's so salty. And that's why I talk about our palate, that here in the US, we're skewed towards salty and sweet. And so, of course, when you get things that don't fit that, they're going to taste gross at first. Like anyone that's grown up drinking soda, when you go to try to drink water, it's gross. If you've grown up eating Skippy peanut butter like me, and then you try natural peanut butter, it's gross,
You have to add salt to it.
right?
Yeah.
You have to, you have to, yeah, you have to even it out eventually. But as you pull out these foods, these kind of very intense, extreme foods, whether they're extremely salty or sweet, and you start to recalibrate your palate,
Mhm.
then it really doesn't taste as bad. Like there's, in fact, like you can make marrow, you can take bone marrow from bones, roast the bones, and not so much that it just melts, but just a little bit so it's nice and soft. And then you can take that bone marrow out of the bones and you can make pudding with it. And it's delicious. It's some of the
Mm.
most, and it won't taste weird at all. It's delicious. Like, so there's so many things you can do with organ meats or parts of the animal that we're just not connecting the dots with. And they don't have to taste strong or weird. Um, like I would say tongue is a good example. That tongue is not, tongue just looks weird and it comes in this kind of thick skin, so it's a little like disarming. But when you actually learn how to cook it, it's really simple. Like anyone that makes braised meats for like a taco night, what how you braise the meat normally is you either pressure cook it, slow cook it, you cook it in some liquid, right? And you just cook it for enough time where that meat gets really soft, right? Well, next time you're doing that, whether it's pork or beef or even chicken, dark meat chicken, throw a tongue in there. And as long as you cook it for an hour to an hour and a half, it will basically when you pull it out, you let it cool enough, and then you just bake a little slice into the skin, that tough kind of tongue skin. And then underneath that, it will peel right off, first of all, if you've cooked it long enough. And then underneath that is this really delicate muscle. And what's cool about this is because whenever we talk about eating meat, particularly like grass-fed beef, 100% grass-fed, inevitably, like we're also talking about something that's very expensive, right?
Mhm.
So one of the ways to lower your grocery bill is that same 100% grass-fed cow that is selling the ribeye at $25 a pound has a tongue. That tongue is only about $5 to $6 a pound, sometimes even less. So it's like, considerably lower. And the meat in that tongue is more nutritious than that ribeye, and it's got better flavor. But you just got to do a little bit of cooking of that, hour and a half, not active cooking, just put it in, braise it, or steam it or whatever you're doing, boil it. Hour and a half, and then it peels right out. And then you take that meat and you combine it with the same sauce and everything that you're doing with the other taco meat, and no one will know. It's that good, and that kind of innocuous. Like it's not as strong tasting as people would think.
Well, I think that's incredible. My mom's favorite, I guess you would say, cut of meat has always been tongue. She has a recipe that she uses. My grandparents used to give their kids every year half a beef for Christmas. That was their Christmas gift. Um, and and my mom always got I think she might have gotten all the tongues because I don't think anyone else wanted them. And so I find that kind of interesting. So I want to take another detour really quick. And James, I didn't prepare you for this question, but we're having a beef. Actually, I think it was slaughtered yesterday, or maybe today it's being slaughtered. A whole beef. And so I'm curious what parts of him I should ask for that aren't typically asked for. Like, I know that I'm going to write down, I know that I want the tongue. I know that I want the lungs because I pay a lot of money for dehydrated lungs for dog treats for my dogs and they love them. So, or they might be freeze dried. I don't have a freeze dryer. I'll dehydrate them. But like you were naming off all of the organ meats, I never thought about keeping the spleen or the kidneys. Like, I guess our listenership is pretty homestead friendly. So they may be asking the same thing. What of any animal, what parts of meat are we not keeping that we really should consider keeping?
Well, the key is what are they willing to give you, and what can they give you legally? If you're going through a USDA facility, now some people are obviously getting it locally slaughtered, and it's kind of behind, barn doors.
Mhm.
In that case, they'll probably give you whatever you want. But if it's a USDA facility, their HACCP plan is their health plan, and it's kind of like their plan of how they're going to slaughter the animal, all the steps they take. It's a pretty it's a it's a pretty convoluted plan, and it takes a time, and it's expensive for the slaughterhouses, and so they don't diverge from it. So if that cut that you want is not in their HACCP plan, then they can't sell it to you. They won't. They legally can't sell it to you. So it's really, that's the question, is what are they willing, what can they give up? What can they sell you? And I personally would advise you take any and all of it. I mean, there's as long as it's edible, which pretty much it all is, including like the stomach is edible. Now, when you get a cow stomach though, it's going to be very green. When you go to like a Mexican market, because they use it's called tripe. They use the cow stomach in menudo, which is a Mexican soup. Um, that is usually bleached, and that's why it's so white. So when you actually get the cow stomach, it's green, or it's kind of the color of whatever they've been eating. If they've been eating grass, it's going to be green. And then you'll find other things in it, like nails. You'll find things in it that they've eaten,
Yeah.
and they might even be stuck to it. But if you don't mind a little labor in terms of pulling that stuff out and cleaning it really well, then you could then go online and find the recipe for menudo and make that soup. And it's one that's so good and so nurturing that my friend who I highly recommend people check out her site. It's called Awfully Good Cooking. She's got recipes for every part of the animal. Her family eats offal every week, and they truly have eaten every single part of the animal. So she chronicles all of it.
Mm.
But she was telling me when her kids have their birthdays and they get to choose what meal they get, they ask for menudo. Like that's how good and nourishing it is that the kids ask for it on their special day.
That's amazing. Okay. All right. So so it'll depend on what we can actually get a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you can get brain even, I would take brain, as long as it's coming from a healthy animal. You can even make brain. So brain and eggs used to be something that farmers ate all the time back in the day. Some probably still do. You can make pudding with that brain as well. It's a very like soft, a soft, you know, organ basically, and it and it can be really delicious. It's not too strong tasting, and it's kind of sweet. It's weird to say, but it's got a little bit of that sweet taste. Sweetbreads, which is usually is actually usually I think the pancreas. It's two organs, pancreas and spleen. Sometimes I'm not sure if they. Well, it's not the spleen, but I'm just saying it's like it's forgetting exactly which two organs, but point is that it's called sweetbreads, but it's not necessarily sweet, but they call it that because it does have a hint of sweetness. And
Interesting.
so this idea that all organs are going to be gross, it's like they're not. They
No.
texture wise, it might be weird for people, but all you got to do is change the texture. So like you said, you could dehydrate it and turn it into jerky, and then it's not as gross. You can cook it and then pulverize it into a pudding or a gruel or something like that. A porridge, right? You could do stuff like that or soups. There's so many little things you could do, but most of all, if you can get it, take it, and then just look up what do I do? And Awfully Good Cooking is a great resource for that.
Okay, perfect. I love that. Okay, so let's go back to pluck for a second. Thank you for that slight derail because that is a question that folks have for sure.
Oh, let me just add this too. If when in doubt as well, particularly around liver, heart, and kidney, you could do spleen too, and even pancreas. Just when in doubt, you're like, I just don't know what to do with these. Don't worry about it. What you need to do is just get them, freeze them, and then every time you have ground meat, pick one or a few of them and just grate it into the ground meat and just grate, 1 to 2 tablespoons. That's it. Not of
Mhm.
each, but just choose choose 2 tablespoons total of whatever you want. Just grate it and then mix it into that ground meat and no one will know. And if you make your own hamburger from your half a cow or a quarter cow, then do the same thing. Like grind a certain percentage of the organ meats of those organ meats I mentioned, just grind them into the ground meat. The key is you just don't want to go over a ratio. So if I find that around 20% or less is the best. If you go over that, then it changes the texture of the meat and the flavor. But
Okay.
if
And
you
is
go
that
under 20%, most people won't know. Like most of the ancestral blends out there that already have it, most of them are between 7 and 12%.
okay? That's really good to know.
And you
Uh,
can use all of them. Like you can literally grind in the liver, the heart, the kidney. So you can just mix all of them together. It won't matter. As long as you keep that ratio down, no one will know.
okay. That's super good to know. And it's a great way to use the whole animal. And I think that's another piece of living sustainably is we have a lot of waste in this nation. And I don't want to do that. I realize we can't change the world, but we can change our little own families and help even just within our community when we're learning these things. So I think that's a big that was a big truth right there.
No,
Is
and it is true. One of the most planetary things we can do, in my judgment, is to eat whole animal. I was
Mhm.
at a Wyoming slaughterhouse and I straight up asked them because I'd heard this, but I didn't have I hadn't had it validated yet, but they validated it for me. He says, "So what are you doing with the non-muscle and bone pieces that you're currently selling?" They said, "Oh, we trash it." And I said, "So what percentage is that?" And he said, "About 50%."
Man.
So if you wanna honor the animals that are being slaughtered, if you want to get more bang for your buck, meaning that you're using more of these you know, we're slaughtering the animal, and what industry would ever just toss or trash 50% of its resource? Like none.
Yeah.
So just by using more of that resource, we're now making the planet better. And think about all the supplements you may not have to buy anymore.
Mhm.
And you're getting it from Mother Nature. It's Mother Nature's multivitamin.
Yeah, it's so true. It's an absolute win-win all around. Yeah, for sure. So let's go back to Pluck for just a second. I just want to know, you mentioned popcorn. If someone were so let's talk about like what flavors you have and how you use them. My favorite was the original. I got the zesty garlic and I can't remember, but the
Spicy mild.
original was so good that we just used that right up.
It's so interesting because the original is the our first product. That was the one that we debuted with, and we called it all purpose at the time. And some people still think of it as all purpose, but we changed the name because we realized actually all of our products are all purpose. Like the
Yeah.
zesty garlic, the spicy mild, you can treat them on put them on anything. And so we just changed all purpose to original, and that one's closest to like a Lowry's or an Old Bay. That's kind of got that smoked paprika in it, and the zesty garlic is really special because it has no nightshades or seeds for anyone that's kind of sensitive to those. It's very herby as well, which I like, and it even has some carrot, some dried carrot in it. And then we have the spicy mild. Now, what's interesting is that one scares people a little bit because they see the word spicy and they're like, "Oh, is it how spicy is it?" And that's why we added the word mild because it truly is mild. Like my youngest daughter who doesn't like spicy, she likes it. And what's fascinating is that when people try all three right in a row, spicy mild's their favorite, but yet it's our least seller, and I think it's just because of the name. But everyone, once they've tried it, they love that one. It's kinda got a barbecuey flavor to it for some reason, even though it's not sweet. There's no added sweeteners or anything like that. I think it's the onion that's in it, but, that one is like all those flavors, those 3 flavors, they're very family focused, family centric. So that's why I always try to tell people like what we came out with products that the whole family can enjoy, even the spicy mild. And we didn't make anything too extreme on any end because I want families to not have to make multiple meals. Like one meal, you sprinkle this on it, you're done. Like the whole point as a father is I was trying to simplify our lives, not make them more complicated.
Yeah.
So first of all, everything is family friendly. Our fourth product is just the organ meat. So that's for people that have been maybe tested that know they need a certain amount of organs. 1 ounce, or sorry, 1 teaspoon of pure, that's the blend. 1 teaspoon is equal to 2 ounces of organs. So it's incredibly concentrated. And so that one's really special because that can go sweet or savory. So some people add that to bulletproof coffees. Some people add that to their smoothies. Some people put it in brownies. Like you could, it's kind of similar to how I described the grading of the organ meats. As long as you keep the ratio down to whatever you're adding it to, you can add nutrients to whatever that is and not have the flavor change.
So that brings me that's incredible. And so that brings me to a question. You said 1 teaspoon equals 2 ounces of organs. How much organ meat should a person like? We're not supposed to have like a whole liver every day. How much organ meat is ample for most people?
No, you really can't. You could push yourself into like vitamin A toxicity if you did. Because it's
Exactly.
that potent, right? It's organ meats are not only nutrient dense, but they're also bioavailable, which means our bodies can absorb the nutrients really easily.
Hmm.
So it's a real bang for your buck. I love that question because I find it fascinating that when you buy organs in supplement form in capsules, the bottle will say take 6. I'm like, well, how do they know? what
Yeah.
I need. Like I've had people, one guy was in front of me at a event and he's like 6'4" and his partner was something like 5'1"
Oh, wow.
and they both were taking the same amount of organs and I was like in capsules and I was like that just doesn't compute for me. So
Mhm.
that's why we sell Pluck as a something you eat. You sprinkle it on because I want your body to tell you how much you need.
Mm.
Because here's the thing, our bodies that we're currently in are Homo sapien. That was designed like 300,000 years ago. I mean, it's not it hasn't changed that much. And so if you think about it, well, what was it designed around back then? Well, it was designed around you either this food's going to kill me or it's going to nourish me. That was kind of it. Is this going to
Right.
kill me or nourish me? That's it,
Yeah.
right? And so how it had a communication pathway that was designed to inform your body of that. So whether it's through your senses, through you see it, you smell it, you touch it, you taste it, all these senses were contributing to a communication of, is this going to kill me or is this going to nourish me? And usually flavor ancestrally equaled nutrition. So if something tasted good, that meant it had nutrition in it. Well, now, skip ahead to our modern times and flavor means nothing. You could have extreme flavor and zero nutrition. And then your body's sitting, as you eat it, your body's like, when's the nutrition coming? When's the nutrition? And it never comes. So it never stops eating because it's the nutrition, it's the nutrients that get it to stop.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's what communicates to your body. And so now these kind of Franken food, these ultra processed foods are confusing our bodies. But one of the ways to get back, we're never going to get back to zero. Like I'm not trying to say we're going to get back to our Paleolithic, knowledge of what we should be eating. But I do believe we can get closer because we are we are really so there's over 8 million species in the world, and we're the only one that looks to someone else to tell us what to eat.
Mm.
So clearly we had this knowledge at one point and now we don't. So the question is, how can I get back closer to what my own body needs? And you have to eat your food. You have to not only like the way I would break up the pyramid of my food pyramid is the top of it is you want foods that the flavors that are found in nature. So flavorful food, but food that has flavors found in nature at the top of the pyramid. In the middle, nutrient dense foods. So not fortified, but the foods that are nutrient dense. And then at the very bottom, and this is the really most important one, is you have to mindfully eat. You have to
Mm.
eat slow enough. You have to eat mindful enough to make sure that you're allowing that communication of what your body needs to come through. If you wolf it down, like think about it, like just think about anyone listening to this, just think about the times when you felt really bloated. It's not something you feel in the moment, you feel it after the fact. Like you
Mm.
eat really fast and you eat too much and then suddenly you get up and you're like, oh, I feel so I have to undo my belt. It's like it's a delayed response because you ate so fast. You didn't actually let your body tell you that it was full. And so, if we just put a little bit more mindfulness into our eating, we will start to get that communication. How it might look is, for example, and I think everyone can identify with this. If I put salt on your tongue, the first time I do it, it tastes good. The third time, your body, it actually starts to change. The taste of the salt starts to taste off. It tastes kind of chemically or bad or something about it that your body actually starts to reject it. Well, that is your body communicating, hey, I'm getting too much of this,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
But if you swallow a salt tablet, that's a delayed response. You get no communication. And then maybe 30 minutes later, you're like, why am I so bloated? Oh, I got too much salt. So
Mhm.
one is guesswork and one is working with my body, but we have to eat mindfully enough, slow enough to allow that communication in. And I always advise people like, well, one thing we can all start doing right away just to be a little bit more mindful. Well, I'll give you three right now. So one is don't bring ingredients into your kitchen that you don't want to eat. Like, so don't bring foods in that aren't serving the desired outcome you have from that food. So make these kind of snacky, desserty foods hard to get. Make them something you have to go out of your house for, because that will make it, once it's harder to get, you will not do it as often. I guarantee it.
And you can replace your bags of chips with popcorn and some Pluck seasoning and some
There
butter.
you go. Totally. So then this, and then the other one is you can like change the environment when you're cooking. A lot of times when, well, okay, actually, let me take that back. So first one is don't bring in food that you don't want to eat. Second one is meal plan. So if you actually take the time to meal plan, you'll start to bring in foods that are built around meals instead of built around your emotional situation or whatever you're comfort eating. You'll move away from just making random purchases. Oh, this is on sale, or oh, look at this. I didn't see that. Let me buy that. This is a new treat. You'll stop doing that and you'll meal plan. And when you meal plan, I recommend that you actually build that meal plan around your schedule. So if you have a really busy day, then that's a slow cooker day, one where you can just throw everything in the pot and let it cook all day and then it's done at the end of the day. Because one of the biggest mistakes we all make is we don't meal plan and then it gets around to 5 o'clock or whatever time you eat your meal and you're done. You're like you're so tired from making decisions all day that you're just like you're resolved to like, well, I don't know what to do. What do you want to do? I don't know. And then you just eat bad stuff. Like you eat out or you make poor decisions when we're fatigued. And then I would say the third one is take a breath, say a prayer, say something grateful right before you eat. Like take a pause before you eat. Like the prayer thing works really well. Saying grace works really well. Um, Literally take a breath and maybe say a mantra. Thank you for this meal I'm about to eat. Whatever it is, to get yourself to just be present in the seat you're in, to take a breath before you start eating. And then I'll even add a fourth, which is put your fork or your spoon down in between bites, and that will slow you down, I promise you.
These are really good nuggets, even though we don't eat nuggets, right? Those are really good nuggets of information. Um, I'm trying to take notes as you're talking, but I filled up my whole page.
That's what we want. Give lots of value because that's ultimately what the mission is to help people.
Well, that's very true. So James, how can we? I feel like I could ask a million more questions, but I'm gonna honor your time. So we'll wrap up. But I want to know how can people find you? How can people order Pluck?
Well, the easiest is to go to our website. Oh, it's not that's the easiest, I should say. One way to do it is to go to our website. The other is so that website is eatpluck.com. The other is you can order us from Amazon, and that's why I said Amazon for some people is the easiest. So I don't want to assume that it isn't. So you can order us on Amazon, our website, and you can find us on socials at Eat Pluck, and then I'm personally at Chef James Berry, and we have so much content out there. We have a blog now that you can find on our website. We have a podcast that's talking about so many fun, interesting topics. Ranchers, we've interviewed so many different ranchers. We talk about regenerative farming. We have a cheesemaker on there. We have homesteaders. So there's so many opportunities to just learn why this stuff matters. Because I think the key at the end of the day is that it's not about you know the newfangled trend. It's about what's the thing that you're going to do that you can stick with. And what I've learned in my 20 plus years is that it's got to contain two traits, okay, for it to be something that is actually going to be something you stick with no matter what's going on in your life. And it may surprise people, but it's this simple and this hard. It's got to be easy and it's got to be delicious. If it's both easy and delicious, then it doesn't matter what happens in your life, you'll still do it. And so that's what I tried to create with Pluck is I tried to make it as easy. If organ meats are the gateway to nutritional abundance, Pluck is the gateway to organs. It's so easy. And as you attested when we first started, it's also pretty darn delicious. So when we have both of those things, my hope is that you just use it. And when you're ready to cook and eat your own organs and make your own stuff, then do that too. But never kind of stop doing a little bit of both or one of the two, because that's where we're getting our nutrients, and that will make a difference in your health. You'll see it. But the key is eat it. Don't swallow it in capsules. Eat it.
Very good. All right. Well, James, I have really enjoyed our time. I appreciate you taking the time to not just talk about your product, but to talk about the why behind it and give us tips on overall general health. This has been really helpful. It's been really good. So I appreciate your time. I do believe that we're going to feature James's product at, I don't think we have it all hashed out yet completely, but we'll definitely have some pluck somehow at the expo. So if you're planning on coming to the 2025 Alaska Homestead Expo, then we'll see what we can do about making it so you can try some pluck. So
Yay.
very good. All right. Well, thank you, James. I really have enjoyed our time.
Yes. Thank you, Tanny. Take care.